In 1971, a grandmother in Greenville, Mississippi, brought the same dish to her family reunion for 42 straight years. She never missed once. When she passed in 2013, over 200 people came to the funeral. More than half of them mentioned that dish by name. That special dish is number 3 on this list. In this list, number 11 started more family arguments than money and religion combined. Number 7 was so expected at reunions from Atlanta to Detroit that showing up without it was treated as a personal betrayal. And number 4 explains why every fast food chain in America has spent 50 years trying and failing to replicate something a grandmother could do in 30 minutes with a cast iron skillet and a cup of flour. These 25 foods did not just feed families. They held them together across state lines and generations and centuries of being told they did not matter. They covered every folding table and card table in the park, sat in aluminum foil pans and cast iron skillets wrapped in dish towels for the drive over. Hit that subscribe button and let us count down some of the greatest foods served at every Black family reunion. Number 25, ambrosia salad. Cool Whip, canned mandarin oranges, miniature marshmallows, shredded coconut, and sour cream folded together and chilled overnight. Children ate it like dessert. Adults pretended they were eating a salad. The whole bowl cost less than $3 and disappeared in 20 minutes. Every reunion had a bowl. Nobody ever asked who made it, because it was always just there, like the ice chest and the folding chairs. Today, it shows up in articles about retro recipes people find embarrassing. In 1978, it was the first thing children ran to when the table was set. Number 24, deviled eggs. Not 6 on a fancy plate, 3 or 4 dozen, arranged on a platter so big it took 2 hands to carry. Yolks mashed with mayonnaise, yellow mustard, and a shake of paprika on top. Every family had one woman who made the deviled eggs, and no one else was allowed to. Her ratio of mayo to mustard was non-negotiable. 4 dozen deviled eggs fed the whole reunion for less than $3. The paprika was not for flavor, it was for presentation. Because even at a cookout, on a folding table in a public park, things were going to look right. Number 23, neck bones and rice. Smoked neck bones simmered low for 3 hours until the meat slid off in tender shreds and the broth turned dark and sticky with collagen. Served over white rice that soaked up every drop, neck bones cost almost nothing because the butcher could not sell them to anyone who did not already know what to do with them. This was the dish that quiet uncles went back to 3 times without saying a word. Grocery stores barely stock them now. A generation of knowledge is walking out the door with every grandmother who stops cooking. But wait until you hear what number 18 did with even cheaper parts of the hog. Number 22, potato salad. This entry requires a warning. No single dish at a Black family reunion carried more weight, more pride, or more potential for conflict than the potato salad. Every family had a version. Every version was correct. Every other version was wrong. Boiled potatoes, hard-boiled eggs, mayonnaise, mustard, sweet relish, celery, onion, salt, pepper, paprika. But the ratios were sacred. Some families added pickle juice. Some added a pinch of sugar. Some used Miracle Whip instead of mayo and started wars that lasted generations. The potato salad arrived covered in foil. It sat in the center of the table like a monument. Nobody touched it until the matriarch gave permission. The recipe was never written down. It lived in the hands of whoever made it, measured by feel, and passed down by standing next to your grandmother and watching until you earned the right. Number 21, chitlins. Cleaned, boiled, and simmered for hours with onion, vinegar, and red pepper flakes. Chitlins divided every reunion straight down the middle. Half the family could not get enough. The other half would not come within 20 feet of the pot. But for the generation that grew up on them, chitlins were history. Enslaved people were given the parts of the hog the plantation house refused. They turned those scraps into food that sustained families for centuries. The fact that chitlins taste as good as they do is not an accident. It is the result of generations of cooks who refuse to let anything given to them in contempt stay contemptible. Number 20. Red drink. Not Kool-Aid. Red drink, the flavor did not matter. Cherry, fruit punch, strawberry, what mattered was the color. It was mixed in a 5-gallon cooler with twice the sugar the packet called for and enough ice to keep it cold through a whole afternoon in August. Every child at the reunion drank it. Every child went home with a red mustache and a stained shirt that no amount of bleach would fix. A packet cost a nickel. Red drink was not a beverage. It was an institution. Number 19. Fried catfish. Thick fillets dredged in seasoned cornmeal and dropped into a deep fryer set up in the backyard. The oil popped and spit. The crust turned golden and shattered when you bit through it. Someone's uncle was always in charge of the fryer. He stood over it with tongs and a cold beer and did not move for 2 hours. That uncle never made anything else. He never brought a side dish. He never helped set up the tables. But nobody questioned his contribution because when the oil hit temperature and the first batch went in, everybody knew. The food was almost ready. Number 18. Pig's feet in vinegar. Pickled or slow simmered until the cartilage dissolved into a sticky, gelatinous sauce that coated your lips and fingers and required a stack of napkins to manage. Pig feet attracted a very specific crowd. The older generation, the ones who grew up on every part of the hog and saw nothing strange about sucking the meat off a knucklebone at a folding table in the park. A pack cost less than $1. Children stared. Teenagers refused. But the elders ate them with a reverence that said, "This food carries a weight that you are too young to understand." Nobody under 40 makes them anymore. When the last grandmother who does is gone, so is the recipe. And so is the memory of what it meant to waste nothing. Here is what people outside this tradition do not understand. The Black family reunion was not just a party. For families separated by the Great Migration, scattered from Mississippi to Chicago to Oakland to Detroit, the reunion was the one weekend a year when the whole family existed in the same place. The food was not casual. It was an act of reconstruction. Every dish on that table was a woman saying, "I am still here. I still remember. I still know how to feed us." The recipes came from the South. They traveled in handwritten notebooks and in the muscle memory of women who made the same dishes so many times they could do it blindfolded. When the cookout stopped or shrank or turned into catered affairs with store-bought sides, the recipes began to die. Not because they were bad, because there was no longer a reason to make them in the quantities that kept them alive. Number 17. Candied yams. Sweet potatoes sliced thick, layered with butter, brown sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, and vanilla. Baked until the sugars caramelized and the edges turned dark and sticky. Some families added marshmallows. Some considered that a crime worthy of being talked about for the rest of the summer. A church mother in Birmingham made her candied yams the same way for 35 years. When her granddaughter tried to add marshmallows in 2004, she was asked to leave the kitchen. The granddaughter still brings it up. A single pan fed 15 people and cost less than $2 in ingredients. The marshmallow debate has never been resolved. It never will be. Number 16. Oxtails, braised for 5 hours until the meat surrendered from the bone and the gravy turned so thick it coated a spoon like velvet. Oxtails were once the cheapest cut at the butcher counter. A few dollars fed 20 people over rice. Today they cost $8 or $10 a pound. The dish that was born from poverty has been priced out of the community that perfected it. Restaurants sell it for $30 a plate and call it a delicacy. The grandmother who braised it for a reunion of 50 called it Tuesday. Number 15 suffered the same kind of betrayal, but from the inside. Number 15. Banana pudding. Vanilla custard cooked on the stove from eggs, sugar, milk, and flour, poured over layers of Nilla wafers and sliced bananas, topped with meringue and browned under the broiler. The wafers softened overnight until the whole thing became a single, impossible texture that was part cake, part cream, part something that has no name. When instant pudding mix replaced stovetop custard, the dish survived in name but lost its soul. The difference between real banana pudding and the instant version is the difference between a handwritten letter and a text message. They carry the same words, they do not carry the same weight. Number 14. Collard greens. A massive pot slow cooked with smoked turkey necks or ham hocks until the leaves turned silky and the pot liquor at the bottom could raise the dead. Vinegar and hot sauce on the table, cornbread on the side for sopping. Collard greens were not optional at a reunion. They were mandatory. The pot simmered all morning. The smell drifted through the house and into the yard and told everyone within a block that something important was happening inside. Number 13. Hot water cornbread. Cornmeal, hot water, salt, and a pinch of sugar, shaped by hand into small oval patties and fried until the outside cracked golden. Not baked cornbread, not cornbread muffins, fried. The kind that burned your fingertips when you picked it up too soon. It went with everything on the table, the greens, the beans, the catfish, the oxtails. The technique was in the hands. Too wet and the patties fell apart in the oil. Too dry and they crumbled. Grandmother shaped them without looking, talking to someone across the kitchen while the oil crackled behind them. That kind of muscle memory takes 40 years to build. A YouTube tutorial cannot teach it. The food industry did not kill these dishes. Distance did. When families were concentrated in the same town, the same church, the same few blocks, cooking for 50 people was just what you did on Saturday. The skills stayed sharp because the demand never stopped. But as families spread out, the reunions got smaller. A dish that once fed 80 now fed 12. And at 12, it was easier to call Boston Market or pick up a tray from the Costco deli counter than to spend 2 days cooking. The catering companies and grocery store deli sections did not replace the food. They replaced the reason to cook it. A grandmother who cooked for the whole family had a purpose. A woman heating up a store-bought tray has convenience. Those are not the same thing. The recipes did not become obsolete. The gatherings that required them did. Number 12. Peach cobbler. Canned peaches in a baking dish. Batter made from flour, sugar, milk, and melted butter poured over the top. The batter rolls around the fruit as it bakes, creating a golden crust crispy at the edges and soft where the peach juice soaked through. A can of peaches and a cup of flour. The whole dessert fed a dozen people and was served warm with vanilla ice cream that melted into the crust before you could finish saying grace. But it is number 11 that people will fight you over. Number 11. Baked macaroni and cheese. Sharp cheddar, eggs, evaporated milk, butter, and elbow macaroni baked until the top formed a golden crust and the inside stayed creamy and molten. This was the dish that started more family arguments than inheritance. Whose mac and cheese was better was not a casual question. It was identity. Aunties defended their recipes with a seriousness that bordered on hostility. Cousins who brought a pan without being asked were quietly discussed in the parking lot afterward. A block of cheddar, a box of elbows, a can of evaporated milk. The ingredients were cheap. The skill was not. The difference between great baked mac and cheese and mediocre baked mac and cheese was 30 years of experience and the refusal to measure anything. Number 10. Chitterling loaf. Clean chitlins chopped fine, seasoned with sage and red pepper, mixed with cornmeal, and pressed into a loaf, sliced and fried until crispy. Almost no one under 50 has heard of it. It existed in the kitchens of women who wasted nothing and invented everything. When those women stopped cooking, the dish simply vanished. No cookbook preserved it, no restaurant revived it. It is gone. Number 9. Smothered pork chops. Bone-in chops dredged in seasoned flour and browned hard, then smothered in thick onion gravy made from the pan drippings, covered and simmered until the meat barely held on to the bone. Served over rice with the gravy pooled around it. Pork chops were the affordable meat. The gravy made them luxurious. The rice made them last. The smothering technique turned cheap cuts into meals that tasted like someone had spent hours and a fortune. They had spent hours. The fortune part was a trick. There is a generation alive right now that is the last living connection to these dishes made the original way. The grandmothers and great-aunts who cooked for reunions of 80 and 100 people without a written recipe, without a measurement, without a timer. They cooked by feel and by memory and by a knowledge that was passed to them the only way it could be, standing in the kitchen next to someone who already knew. When they are gone, the chain breaks. Not because younger generations do not care. Because the format that kept the knowledge alive, the large gathering, the all-day cook, the 3 generations working in one kitchen, no longer exists the way it used to. If you want to save these recipes, you have to go get them now, not next year. Now. Pick up a phone before you finish this video. Number 8. Fried corn. Fresh corn cut from the cob and fried in bacon drippings with onion, salt, pepper, and a pinch of sugar until the kernels caramelized and the natural starch thickened the pan into something creamy and smoky and sweet. Not boiled corn, not corn on the cob. Fried corn, the kind where the drippings and the corn milk combined into something no vegetable had any business tasting like. A dozen ears cost less than $2 in the summer. The bacon grease was free. The dish fed 15 people and cost almost nothing. Number 7. Sweet potato pie, not pumpkin pie. Sweet potato pie. Roasted sweet potatoes, butter, sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, vanilla, evaporated milk, and eggs in a homemade crust. Not having sweet potato pie at a reunion was not an oversight. It was an offense. It was the kind of absence that got whispered about on the drive home. The pie connected the family to the South regardless of where they live now. A few sweet potatoes and a handmade crust. The whole pie cost less than $3. Pumpkin pie is what they serve at other people's holidays. Sweet potato pie is what your grandmother made because her grandmother made it, and her grandmother made it because sweet potatoes were the one thing that grew, no matter what. Number 6. Spaghetti, not Italian spaghetti. Reunion spaghetti. Ground beef with onion and green pepper in a thick, slightly sweet tomato sauce, tossed with spaghetti noodles. It bore no resemblance to anything in any Italian restaurant. It was its own thing entirely. Every reunion had a massive pot because it was cheap, filling, and every single child would eat it without complaint. A box of spaghetti, a pound of ground beef, and a can of sauce. Less than $4. Fed 20 kids and their parents, spaghetti was the peacekeeper of the reunion table. No arguments, no drama. Just a plate everybody agreed on. Number 5. Pound cake. A pound of butter, a pound of sugar, a pound of flour, a pound of eggs, mixed until heavy, baked slow until the crust turned golden and the inside stayed dense and moist. No frosting, no glaze, nothing but cake. The pound cake sat at the end of the table, sliced thick, and was a thing you ate standing up with coffee after everything else was gone. A real pound cake took arm strength to mix and patience to bake. It lasted for days. It tasted better on day 2. The box mixes that replaced it produced something that looked similar and tastes like nothing. A woman in Atlanta baked the same pound cake recipe for her family reunion every year from 1959 to 2008. When she could no longer stand long enough to mix the batter, she sat in a chair and directed her granddaughter through every step, correcting her twice on the folding technique. The granddaughter still makes it. She is the only one left who does. Number 4. Fried chicken, every piece seasoned with salt, pepper, garlic powder, and paprika. Dredged in flour, fried in cast iron until the crust turned the color of dark honey and the meat stayed juicy all the way through. The fried chicken at a reunion was not bought. It was made. By someone specific, someone who had been making it the same way for 30 or 40 years. The chicken was fried in batches the morning of. It traveled in paper bags or foil-lined coolers. It was eaten at room temperature because somehow that is when it tasted best. The crust held, the seasoning deepened, the meat stayed moist. A whole chicken cost less than $3. Flour and seasoning cost pennies. The skill cost a lifetime. Every fast food chain in America has tried to replicate what a grandmother could do with a cast iron skillet, a bag of flour, and a can of Crisco. None of them have come close. None of them ever will. Number 3. Barbecue ribs. Spare ribs rubbed with salt, pepper, garlic, paprika, and brown sugar. Slow cooked over charcoal in a homemade smoker built from an oil drum cut in half. The smoke took 4 or 5 hours. The sauce went on at the end, thick and sweet and sharp with vinegar, mopped on with a dish rag, tied to a stick. The man at the smoker was the most important person at the reunion. He arrived before dawn. He built the fire. He watched it for hours. He did not leave. He did not help set up tables. He did not arrange chairs. He had one job, and it was the only job that mattered. When the ribs came off, dark and glistening and falling apart at the bone, he served them with the quiet pride of someone who had done the most important work of the day. A rack of spare ribs cost $3 or $4. The charcoal cost a couple dollars. The sauce was made from ketchup, vinegar, brown sugar, and hot sauce. The whole operation cost less than $15 and fed 40 people the best meal of their year. This is a dish that 200 people mentioned by name in a guest book in Greenville, Mississippi. Now you know why. Number 2. Pecan pie. Dark corn syrup, sugar, butter, eggs, vanilla, and a heaping cup of pecans in a handmade crust. Baked until the filling set into a caramelized, candy-like layer with pecans suspended across the top like a mosaic. In the South, pecan trees grew in yards and on roadsides. The pecans were free, the pie cost almost nothing, but it tasted like something that should cost $40 at a bakery. Pecan pie was the quiet legend of the dessert spread. It did not announce itself. It did not need to. Number 1. The spread itself. There is no single dish at number 1 because the greatest forgotten food at every Black family reunion cookout was not any one item. It was all of them together on the same table at the same time. 25 dishes made by 15 different women across 3 generations. Foil pans and cast iron and Tupperware and Pyrex lined up on tables that bowed in the middle from the weight. Paper plates loaded until they bent. Children eating in the grass. Elders in lawn chairs with plates balanced on their knees. The spread was the dish. The act of bringing all of it together, every recipe carried from every kitchen, every tradition maintained across every mile of migration, that was the food. And that is what has been forgotten most completely. Not any single recipe. The occasion that required all of them at once. The gathering that made the cooking make sense. Here is my challenge. Call someone in your family this week, not next month. This week, ask them how they made the potato salad. Ask them about the sweet potato pie. Ask them about the dish they brought to every reunion for 30 years. Write it down, record it on your phone. Do whatever you have to do, but get it. Because these recipes do not live in cookbooks, they live in people, and people do not last forever. Drop the dish your family was known for in the comments. I want to know if the mac and cheese gets more love than the fried chicken. I want to know if anyone else's grandmother made chitterling loaf and nobody believed them. Because these were not just cookout foods. They were the way a family said, "We are still here, we still remember, and we are still feeding each other."